Hello, and welcome to the Alchemists Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people. Yay.
I'm Emily. Hello.
I'm KristaLyn, and it is still June. So because it is still June and because we felt very moved to talk about it, we are going to have an episode that the astrology agrees with, and it is going to be about pride.
It's going to be about pride. Happy Pride to all of those who celebrate. Just want to start off by saying that. I also just want to start off by saying you've earned the ability to celebrate this month. And I know that that is like a common narrative of like, oh, other people, other months, whatever. That's always like the biggest issue with Pride Month that people outside of the community have when they talk Pride Month. It's like, you just get to have this month to celebrate. People in the LGBTQ plus community have fought and died for this. So absolutely celebrate it. I hope we've done something wonderful. If not, you still have a couple days left to do something. And you can be yourself and prideful all year round. I just want to acknowledge that to start, because I think that's really, really important to note.
Agreed.
Oh, we wanted to talk a little bit about like the spirituality of being yourself, the energy of being yourself. And also both Krista and I are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about our journeys there too, because the truth is, the more you know yourself, the better you are with your psychic and spiritual abilities, the more confidence you have, the more growth you can have in your own journeys. And so sharing some of that on our end to hopefully help you know us more and maybe get inspired by our stories, we thought that would be kind of fun.
Yeah. And also being at different positions in the journey of it. Like Emily, you've been very comfortable, or at least known your place in this community for as long as I've known you, which is really cool. I've figured it out over the last 3 years. So whether you are more like in the journey or kind of a little fresh and still getting used to saying things out loud, we see you. We can actually relate. I'm going to fix my microphone, so apologies for the noises.
Oh, you're good. So let me I guess I'll talk a little bit about my journey and then also some of the struggles that I've had in this sort of journey space, because I think it's very validating. And it's something you and I were actually talking about in Greece, about having a place in the community, even though you're not necessarily presenting like fully living in that space, even though you are. It's hard. And for me, it's like, so I'm bi. I've been bi my entire life. I've known I was bi since the moment I found out you could be attracted to people. I've been openly bi since I was like 8, like probably earlier. I don't even remember. It was right about the same time that I realized that like not everyone could do the psychic stuff I could do. It was right about the same time I realized that, oh, not everyone's attracted to everybody. That's weird. Like, so despite being raised Catholic, my parents are incredibly open-minded. They're very, very liberal. We live obviously in California, basically. I grew up on like 1 mile outside of the California border on the Nevada side, but we went to San Francisco every year. I mean, it was very, very open, very, very liberal, very environmental, and like love everybody focused. Also, one of my main mentors in life was Leo Buscaglia when I was a little kid, and all the work he's ever done is about loving everyone constantly. So I was really early on exposed to just how much love and appreciation is out there for everybody, and that everyone can love everyone no matter what. So it was never something to me that was like a coming out situation. It was just like, whenever I would talk to my mom about who I had a crush on, it didn't matter who I talked about, if it was a girl or a guy or whatever. Like, it was like there was no hesitancy there. So for me, I've always really lived in a space of being openly bisexual, and I've been in relationships with women and I've been in relationships with men. Obviously now, though I'm in a queer relationship, and it looks like a very typical heterosexual relationship. And so that has been hard to kind of battle my own identity against, is being like, no, I've been a part of this community literally forever. For me, there was never a time when I wasn't in it. I was never closeted. It was just, it's always been very open. And that's props on my privilege. I'm just going to completely acknowledge that. I know that is incredibly, incredibly privileged, and I am incredibly lucky. So I've always been a huge advocate for LGBTQ plus rights, because I know that my story is how everyone's story should get to be, and it's not, and that's not fair. So I put a lot of energy and effort into that space, but that has been one of my main challenges, is being like, hey, feeling weird about talking about the identity I've always had, because on the outside, it looks very heteronormative presenting, even though it is very, very much not. Yeah, so that's a little bit of my story, I guess, is the best way I can highlight it as far as my coming to. And also when I say bi, and I do just want to point this out. I've always identified as bisexual, so it's really comfortable for me to identify as bisexual. This was before anything like pansexual was really claimed or even known about. So I've just always honored that bi meant attracted to more than one gender, which means the whole spectrum for me. There's no like, it's just this and just this. For me personally, it's all of the genders. It's not like limited. So I just want to highlight that because I know there's some conversation oftentimes between like bi and pan. And the truth is just claim what you're comfortable with. That's just the root of it. And I know people that are really comfortable claiming pan, and I know people that are really comfortable claiming bi. Not gonna lie, the flag colors also have a contribution for me because I'm like, this has always been my flag colors and I'm really anchored and connected to them and I don't really want to shift them over. So there's kind of been that element to it too. But yeah, so there's a little bit about my story.
Yeah, I really love that because, you were talking about how you grew up in a community where it was everywhere and like it was accepted and it like almost wasn't even questioned, which is really cool to me. And I grew up in a community. I was just reading some of my old journals the other day. I was looking for a recipe that I transcribed from this wonderful woman who was in Bulgaria. And as I was looking for this, I had to go through a bunch of different journals. And I'm just like looking at my thought process as a teenage kid, stuck and confused and like trying to fit the community that I was a part of. I grew up Protestant, but very much like you have to be a certain way. You have to follow these guidelines. This is how God's going to love you the most. This is how you are supposed to be more like Jesus. And it's like, ironically enough, that's another dude that said, just love everybody all the time. But that wasn't as much of the focus when we were trying to judge ourselves so harshly. So you said as soon as you knew that you could be attracted to people, you knew that you were bi. As soon as I knew that we could be attracted to people, I knew that I was messed up somehow or that I had like glitched.
What you said that is awful.
Well, my family always really encouraged me to hang out at the mall with other girls from my school. And I would sit there and they'd be talking about how attractive such and such a person was. Oh, he's looking at me. He's so cute. And I'm just like, is that attractive? Is that what that is? Like, and is that flirting? Like I was the butterfly meme the entire time. Like, is this what you're talking about? All I want, and like I had a cardboard stand-up of Legolas, not Orlando Bloom. It was Legolas. And everybody's like, oh, you have a crush on Orlando Bloom. And I was like, sure, I have a crush on Orlando Bloom as Legolas, except that's what I want to look like. I don't really care about like being in a relationship with that. That's how I want to look. And of course, Legend of Zelda. I wasn't Zelda. I was Link. And I was very specific about that. So it took me until, honestly, one of these things where TikTok made me much more aware of it in the little bubble that I was living in. And I started realizing like, oh, this all feels like me. And there are words to put to the things that I feel, and other people have felt that way. And because this is going to be a little bit of a bomb to drop on the people, around me if I ever do. So my plan initially was I can accept who I am. And as long as someone listens to me, they can call me what they want to call me. And that was my sort of modus operandi for the first 2 years of figuring it out. This past year, I was like, by the way, now that I've moved out of the city that I was in, I'm like, by the way, I do have pronouns. By the way, this is who I am. And just even over the last 8 months for me, I've gotten so much more comfortable. You've been there for the past 3 years, the whole time. You're one of the first people I told, get yourselves a good friend, everybody. But
I'm just so proud listening to you talk about it because we're like, I know I was in that stage and you did so good. And now you're here and it's so great.
Yeah. And so like now it's like holding that space and then being able to hold it for others as they're like, all you have to do is be one step ahead in order to help the person who's right behind you. And so getting to that second step changes a lot. But now it's just like, no, I'm fully aware and conscious and not even sorry about the fact that I am non-binary and I'm ace. And I prefer they, them, just because I don't, it's almost like a, hey, you, when you say he or she, I don't think about it. But when you say like a they, them, it's almost like you're actually calling my name. It makes me pay attention more. So to anybody else out there who's dealing with pronouns and trying to explain it to somebody, that might help. It's like, this is what makes me actually respond when you call me, kind of like how you had to memorize my name. So that's been part of the journey. And I remember my coming out, so to speak, was trying to discuss with my parents how God feels about people who are gay. And I worked in there, as I always do. I don't do the coming out, I do the slipping in. So I slip into the conversation. Like, if you had to ask me, I would tell you that I'm non-binary and that my pronouns are they, them. But back to this person that you're focused on, it's like, now, you can sit with that, you can think about it. And now you can't say I didn't tell you. I think it's also a bit of a trauma response. So I'm not saying it's the healthy way to go about it, but it was my method at the time of how I worked it in.
I appreciate you slipping it into casual conversation. I think that's amazing. One thing I will say also is that I have realized about myself is I've always been very much gray sexual is what it's called. So basically I'm attracted. Bodies don't really matter to me. Bodies don't matter to me at all. It is very much an intellectual, spiritual connection that matters to me. So whenever I've ever been, no matter, and this is like whenever people are like, when you're in high school, like, what are your type? And I'd always be like, I don't fucking know, a person. Like, and then I look back at like every person I've ever been attracted to, no matter what gender they are, it's always because of a mind thing and a spiritual thing. It's never been because of a body type. So like I dated across all body types because that has never even like, it's not even processed to me at all, which is again, that like we are spiritual beings having a physical experience and our body has a very separate consciousness to us. And what I will say is because of my own really traumatic sexual history, which is very traumatic. Oops, sorry, smack my microphone.
Take very your traumatic out on the microphone.
But I have a very traumatic history there that it's been for the last basically 12 years, like really getting into understanding how that relates to me and those types of things. And a lot of healing in that zone is becoming partnered with your body in a really unique way, because it's not you forcing your body to do something or whatever. It's like having a consciousness there about like what your body and your spirit actually aligns to want. And I think that is a huge part of the journey. So even if you're questioning things or you're like, I don't know what I am, awesome, great, you're perfect, you're wonderful, you're right in the right spot. But if you're looking on kind of figuring out some stuff and how to figure out some stuff, talk to your body, like genuinely talk to your body, ask your body some questions, because that is your partner. It's the only being on the entire earth that's gone through literally everything with you. So it's kind of your best friend, even though it's probably betrayed you more than once, because that's how we perceive things. So that is a really, really great place to start that I highly recommend doing. Also, I can't stress this enough. Representation matters so much. Read queer books, read books written by queer people, read books about queer people, watch programs that are either, produced or written by queer people or star queer people, like that have good representation. There's been a lot of talk, especially in the book community, about like good versus representation versus bad representation. There's a particular author who advertised a bi fantasy that I am so upset by. We're just going to put it there.
Are you just gonna put it there?
To Krista. We are just going to put it there, but the queer representation is absolutely awful, despite it being marketed so heavily in that way. And it's just all written from unhealed trauma. And you can pretty easily see that when you start to read a book. If it all of a sudden feels like it's entirely unhealed trauma, then maybe pause on that one and try to read something else. Just be really discerning kind of in that space for you. Also, however you honor yourself, and this is one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this, because it goes so similarly with like your psychic abilities and your psychic gifts. And one of our upcoming episodes, we're going to talk about like how to be psychic in casual conversation. And so we're going to get more deeply into this, but just however you choose to reveal that to the world or express that in the world is completely perfect. I know during Pride Month, it's so, people who aren't fully out yet or who don't really know, like there's kind of a pressure almost to be like, oh, I want to be part of that community or whatever, but then I don't know what it is. So there's like a weird tug of war. And that also happens in like the psychic spiritual community too, or people who aren't necessarily out of the broom closet, as so we put it, for with their witchy psychic spiritual stuff, oftentimes feel like, oh, well, I'm not doing it right because I'm not sharing it with the world, or I need to owe the world this sort of thing. And you don't. You 100% don't. Everyone's stuff is unique and different and beautiful in its unique and differentness. And that is the core of it. Truly, that I just want to make sure that we mention, because I think it's so important.
Yeah. I think, as you've kind of been saying, like as you're reading different representations, go with the ones that resonate with you.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, there's not only going to be one way to feel exactly what you feel either. Just
No.
because, I mean, I was exploring with someone else in my life who believes that they may also be ace. And I was like, cool, you have no idea. And then you just dive into but there's a whole spectrum. And I've been hearing a lot about spectrums in my life lately, but there's a whole spectrum of ways that can express itself. So one thing is, you don't have to have exactly the label. If you don't want to like figure out, am I demi, am I, all these other things, just, you can go with the term so people know where to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important. If you do want the specific term, go with that. Perfect. So that people know where to meet you. It's the same thing as small talk. It's just small talk that some people are not comfortable with yet, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting. It's the small talk I'm actually interested in. So feel free to let me know where you land on those things. But there's a whole world to explore. It's a really great rabbit hole to get into, and just don't let it become a pigeonhole.
Yeah. And also, if you are a cisgendered heterosexual person, awesome. Wonderful. That's beautiful for you. And I'm so happy you're in that space, that you're confident. If you can be an ally, like that's fine. Being an ally is totally good. It is an act of love, genuine and true love, to respect someone's pronouns, gender identity, or sexual orientation. So that is more than enough. You don't have to do more than that. If you're not part of the community, that doesn't mean you can't show up. One of my favorite videos that's come out of this entire month has been a man in a wheelchair on the side of a pride parade, and he had a sign saying, "Recovering bigot, I'm so sorry, free hugs." And I cry. I saved it and just like watched it on repeat, because I always cry, because like the amount of love that takes is so much. And to like not only acknowledge, just be like there to be like free hugs, like that's always sweet. Like people do that at Pride and I love that. But to be like, I'm sorry, I fucked up, and I used to be an asshole to you, and I'm not trying to be that anymore, openly in public, like, ooh, incredible. Like that is some beautiful divine masculine love. So as I get like teary about it, every time I watch it, I just cry. It's just
that's
so amazing.
incredible. That is
Right?
incredible.
Yeah, I'll try to, if I can share it. I don't know if I can download it. It's on Instagram. But if I can download it, I'll try to share it in the Patreon or anything. But you guys can look it up on Instagram. I'm sure it's available there. Really good. It's really good. If you want to go cry, do it. I do also just want to say, this is a week for good cries, so have fun.
I've been crying a ton. So if you have been crying a ton, it doesn't matter what orientation you are, you're allowed to cry.
All right.
Yeah. And hopefully it's the kind of cry that moves you forward. I know as we're recording this, and even later this week, I will get you the exact dates, but as we're recording this, Uranus and Mars are square each other. So there's the opportunity for some out of left field arguments that might come up, or certain incidents that really anger you that you didn't know were there, to just pop up. Let yourself feel that. And if anger is one of the things that you're feeling, don't shove it down to make it resentment, but also just know we're all going through that right now. So yours is just as important as someone else's, and theirs maybe just as important as yours, because we're going to experience it so individually too. See and talk to who you need to see and talk to for those things. One thing that is coming up consistently in my personal life, as well as in consultations with clients, is the interesting difference between spirituality and its usefulness, and then also the usefulness and spiritual practice of therapy. They go hand in hand. You can have an astrologer and a psychic and a therapist, because you already have an astrologer and a psychic and a doctor. Like, give yourself the ability to have who you need for what you need, and the support you need for what you need.
Yeah. And that you should, like, spirituality is not a filler for mental health. It's not. It can help. It is a tool to assist in mental health, but you need many tools to assist in mental health. It's, again, a balancing between the physical, which your mental health is actually your physical health. Like, it is housed with your body, in your body space a lot of the time, and your spiritual health, which is obviously different, but can affect the physical, just as the physical can affect the spiritual. They all are layers, and we're all complicated beings of weirdness. So have all of the things, please. I also just want to point out how absolutely wonderful it is that Pride Month encapsulates both Gemini and Cancer season. Like, I know
Mhm.
it's not fully either because it's obviously a month, which is like a half and half situation. But I think it's so cool because the first half is always, and you have probably noticed this if you follow Pride on social media. The first month is always half of the month is always like celebration and parades and glitter, and we're gonna go to drag brunch. That is always the first half of the month. And the second half of the month is often like social justice issues. Let's actually talk about the history of this. Let's get really emotional about our journeys. Like, let's connect on this deep level so we can take this forward. Let's talk about the legislation that's affecting us right now.
Mhm.
It goes from like a party to like cerebral really quickly, which is just so on brand for the astrological seasons that it's
Right.
entering into. It always makes me smile. So I just want to like highlight that because I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. It is funny how, the calendars used to be different, believe it or not. They used to go along with the zodiac a little bit more. The zodiac was actually, more suited to the way the calendar was, vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. Um, and now it's like we're all a little bit off skew, but it
Yeah.
still kind of works. We still move with the energy of it. So like I tend to be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, June, but Gemini season.
Mm-hmm.
And then we move into Cancer season and it's summer and it's about nurturing yourself and loving yourself and getting started with things. I think the cool thing about the mutability of Gemini is we get a lot of things out. We express so much. And then we get into okay, now that I've expressed all that and I can see it and I can be with it and it is out there for people to see, how
Mm-hmm.
do I connect now? How do I get into where I get to move, where I get to integrate all of this into who I am and find the people that nurture me that I can also nurture? And you can
Mm-hmm.
see how that flow really works. It's really lovely to see. And I appreciate it.
Yeah. I fully 100% agree on that
Mhm.
one. Yeah, it's just such a neat energy to like move through. And what I what I think characterizes a lot of Gemini season 2 is also curiosity. And I always want to just like hold space for that in that way, because obviously Pride Month, people are curious, people want to know what's going on. Like, either
Mhm.
people are discovering their own identity because they're seeing it represented for the first time a lot of times with Pride, or even hearing a song about it or whatever. Which I have some favorite like Pride songs that I play on loop during this time of the year that I just love. Or they're curious about like, okay, that's not me, but like, how can I help or whatever. So there's like some really cool curiosity that also kind of flavors this season.
Mhm.
And the cool thing with it is I think it's really a neat setup, especially this year for the next couple months. Because shit's gonna be weird.
Mhm.
It's gonna be real weird until
There's a
like
lot of
September.
Yeah, there's a lot of outer planet stuff happening. And by a lot, I mean like one or two things, but it's more than usual. I was just
Right.
looking at the transits today and I was looking at like what dates do these perfect? Luna does this really cool thing where it will show you the planets and the aspects that are coming into orb, and then it'll show you
Mhm.
the date that they're actually going to perfect. And I'm looking at this one for like July and I'm like, ooh, Pluto and Neptune have a sextile. Now, sextile subtle, but that's still two outer planets as part of their cycle. Whoa.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
that's like one of the biggest like transpersonal planets interacting with each other. This is Richard Tarnas level stuff. Richard Tarnas is the author of Cosmos and Psyche. He really studies the outer planet cycles and things and their effects on society and culture, which is really cool and fascinating. There is also a mini docuseries called Gods of Change, I think it is.
Mm.
Or Changing of the Gods. There it is.
Mhm.
That he talks about on it. It's a little bit blown out of proportion kind of stuff because it's meant to
Mhm.
grip people and like bring them into understanding. So it's kind of like a lead magnet in and of itself, but it's still pretty cool as like a little mini, what are you kind of looking at when you get into this if you're more of a visual person. That's coming up, and we're living in currently the opening Saturn Jupiter sextile from their conjunction back in 2020 at the very end of 2020. Now
Mhm.
we're kind of coming out of that. I was comparing it to moon cycles, where if that were a new moon, we'd be coming into the crescent phase of the light finally dawning on what just happened
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yep.
has it been a crazy week of continuations of things that kind of started at that point? You find a lot of people, Reddit was covered with the what do you miss about quarantine posts again.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, interesting that
I have some missing.
And just the fact that we're thinking about it, but we can think about it in a different way. The feeling that we have towards it now is less like, oh my gosh, that was so close. That just happened. And now it's like, oh wow, it's been 3 years and now we're
Yeah.
totally different, like at different levels.
Yeah.
And some of us are nostalgic for it and some of us are still creeped out by it. And we're in that process now, but we're at a place where we can kind of look at it.
Yeah, I'm definitely nostalgic for it. I loved it mostly because it's the first time the whole world has been going through something together, and I loved that feeling.
Yep.
But it is true. It was 3 years ago. It's interesting because we talk about whenever Weston and I talk about the before time, that's what we call it. We're like, oh, it was in the before time. Now we're in the after time. And that's really how it feels now. Instead of the during time that we have been in, we have finally hit the after time, which is a really interesting thing. Like I got a COVID booster and I was like, oh, I forgot my card. She's like, whatever, if you want us to put it on your card, you can bring it in later. And I was like, oh, right. Like no one cares about the cards anymore. Like we don't have to look at them. That's a trip. Okay. Because you don't. Like I still bring mine everywhere, but it's like it's the way that like our grandparents who survived the Great Depression always like washed their plastic cutlery to like make sure they saved it. It kind of feels like that now. And I'm like, interesting. Okay, like this is what we're doing. I still have masks hanging for the kids to grab if they need to grab a mask before they go out the door. I'm like, they're not going to, like they don't need that. All right then. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
Come with that.
I got my last booster just as the bivalent one came out, and like you don't need another one for a year after that. And I was like, oh, I don't have to be counting the months since the last one. And I was at a doctor's appointment today, and it's just in my wallet, the card, and it basically falls out because it doesn't fit in a card slot, and it's all wibbly paper, so like it's not very well thought out for people who would have to carry it for a long time. But I also realized like there are no more lines on it, so where would the next one be written? And I had the same like realization of probably won't. We're into the normal now, which is really, it feels like a maturity. Like we've come into some kind of fruition with that, or we're coming into at least an awareness of that, which is very true for what the sextile kind of aspect would be giving us.
Yeah. It's just very interesting to feel that out.
Yeah.
Also, I just want to say, if you are looking for a deity connection to support whatever gender identity, sexual orientation you have, there is one out there, I promise. Just
more than you would probably think.
So many, like just in the Hellenic pantheon, like holy shit. Like Zeus is bi or pan, Apollo is incredibly pan, Hestia is ace, Hermes is most likely non-binary. I don't think he particularly cares. I say he because that's how the myths are written, but genuinely non-binary gender fluidity happening in that situation. And those are just part of the core 12. Dionysus is very, very gay. Athena is a lesbian, which is hotly debated, and people who are heteronormative and bigots oftentimes are like, no, she's not. She is. She is. Different things like that. But there's so much just in that pantheon. And I'm not even talking about like Loki and the Norse pantheon and like all of the deity stuff there. If you any sort of Shintoism, everything has a spirit. So there is all sorts of gender fluidity and stuff in that space as well. So if you need like if you want help, if you want support, you can do any sort of research in any sort of pantheon you feel drawn to, and then reach out to that deity, reach out to that god, and like get that support. It's really helpful to know that, especially those of us who have a lot of internalized Christianity stuff that we might be overcoming. It's really cool to have like a god support that journey in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And honestly, even when you get deeper into the Christianity stuff and you actually look at it the way it originally was before it got so modified, or I'll find a better word for it later, you find that like there's so much more to it than that. Like even when you read like ancient Greek, which is what a lot of the older books, ancient Greek, Arabic, Hebrew, those are your classical languages kinds of things. Ancient Greek has a whole neuter or neutral tense.
Yeah.
Like as compared to masculine and feminine words, which we find a lot in a lot of languages. That one's like, nope, this one's just in the middle. Okay. So that's one of the reasons I'm learning ancient Greek, so I can read the text and be like, is this a he though? And like, how does this work?
is this a he though?
This sounds like it might be somewhere in the neutral. We'll find out. And somebody probably already has, but I'm going to be finding out on my own personal journey, and I'll probably end up wanting to share it as I do.
It's amazing. Yeah, and like, of course, you may or may not have heard about this, but like many native and indigenous tribes of the North America and South America had like 15 different genders that you could be, and that was totally normal. And so, yeah, just there's so many different things. I saw a really fun video by a creator the other day who's an indigenous creator, and basically he was talking about how, you know, someone who's bigoted is like, what's happening to this country? Like, I want, you know, where did my old country go? And he was like, oh, you left it in Europe. And it's like, oh, burn. But like, very much so. Like, that is the idea there too. If this is originally a very supportive, loving space of all orientations, and then it came in unnecessarily and broke it down. And now we're bringing it back.
That, sorry, for anybody who's watching and just saw my face, that reminded me of some other news that Emily knows about that I got recently about, you know, what happened to this country and what's missing now, which I think might be a little anecdote that goes into its own episode. And the topic would be about forgiveness, the way it's sold versus the way it's actually done. So if that's something you're interested in, especially like, comment on the video if you want to hear more about that. The story will be in there. It's something I'm still processing and spinning on myself, but it's something I will probably be sharing at some point, and that would be a good way to do it, is to use it as an example.
I mean, maybe we have a couple options. So currently, like if you're in our Patreon or you want to join the Patreon, we have some options to vote on. So we have how to be psychic and casual conversation, super simple spells, myth or history, doesn't matter, and then new age deconstruction. So those are kind of our topics to vote on right now. And I think probably it could fit into how to be psychic and casual conversation, to be totally honest.
Yeah. Yeah. We also have a fun guest opportunity that we're looking forward to in the next month or so. That's going to help us navigating Venus retrograde while Venus is in Leo, which, by the way, Venus in Leo Pride, another reason that we wanted to do this conversation today and really kind of bring that to the front, because Venus is there and she's saying it's time.
Yeah.
Mars is also there, by the way. Both of the two like gender ones are there. So that makes a lot of sense.
Also, we have some super fun announcements coming up in the next couple months. A couple months, I say, but really starting in probably about like 2-3 weeks. We have some really cool announcements that we're so excited to share with you. So just stay tuned to that. It needed to be tuned. But I'm genuinely so excited to talk about it and share it. We are really stoked. So we can't wait to talk to you about it, is the root of it.
It's going to be great. It's going to be fun. It's probably going to be a new way of us being able to connect with people in a very cool way that brings spirituality somewhere where it can grow and go anywhere. Which is what I'm looking forward to. Because, you know, one of the things you always hear is like, oh, I feel so good here, and then I have to go home. What if we could do something a little bit more with that? So that's a teaser. Sorry, but that's what I'm excited about.
No, it was well done. Awesome.
There was the alert that I said was going to happen on this call.
Oh, ding.
I guess the teaser was important. I don't know. We'll find out.
Okay. I do want to just address one quick question in the Patreon, and this is one we can talk really quickly about. But basically the question is, I'm interested in both of your perspectives on Hecate. Talk about a multi-dimensional goddess. She's incredible.
Crossroads. Yes.
Yep, exactly. Do you want to start on that one?
I adore Hecate. I think Hecate has, so I've read a lot about Hecate, full disclaimer, in Mysteries of the Dark Moon Goddess by Demetra George. Hecate gets a really great shout out, as well as many other dark moon goddesses. We're talking Medusa and that kind of stuff, crossroads kind of goddesses. And you get to find out why they are framed the way they are and what darkness actually means, and how darkness is not darkness. It's the allowance of inspiration to come. It's very Socratic, I think, you know, where you just sit in the openness of ignorance and then allow illumination to come upon you, and then give yourself the opportunity of a crossroads, rather than saying it has to be this one way. It can be multiple ways, and I can take this way right now, and I can take that way later, what I think is very appropriate for a Pride Month topic. So putting it lightly, Hecate, typically it's considered 3 in 1, right? A lot of the goddesses they have like a tri situation going on, which is of course also associated with the moon in a lot of ways. Your full moon, your new moon, and then the balsamic that we kind of draw in. So yeah, Hecate just being that liminal space of pure creation, which is something that people with a uterus actually have in them, and in history that was really honored. So yeah, I could go on, but Emily, how do you think about it?
Very, very similarly. Very, very similarly. She is very much a goddess of magic in its different forms. So it's not necessarily just, oh, magic and manifestation. It's like, no, like the youthful magic, the middle life magic, and the end of life magic, and their differences, and how we can transmute and use those differences, not just based on the period of life that we're in, but also on the style of magic we're trying to connect with. So she has a really, really beautiful energy in that way. And in readings, and when I've channeled her, she will show up in one of 3 different forms based on the type of magic she's bringing into the space. I think she's a really powerful deity. I will say, mostly because of Wicca, she has been pop cultured a little bit. And so I would urge you to read original myths about her. I would urge you to read, like, again, the book that Krista just recommended by Demetra George. Absolutely. That sounds exactly right with her energy. Because I do think Wicca kind of borrowed from everything and kind of mushed it all around. So I would just say that I think there's a lot of energy with her that is more complicated than maybe some of the pop culture stuff there. However, with every deity, they are their own person. So talk to them personally, get to know them personally. That she has so much raw creation energy. I will also say though, too, she's also one of those deities where, like, you don't want to fuck around and find out. You don't. So don't show her any disrespect. She has been known for dragging a person down to the underworld sort of situation. Or a soul or an entity or spirit, etc. So make sure that, not to scare you from her or anything, but just she's not someone that you want to like invoke out willy-nilly. You like want to have some reverence, just basically in her presence.
Yeah. And actually on that note, we are going to be doing for our Patreons, the bonus video of the month is going to be how to really get the blessing of guardians of sacred spaces and how to be respectful of spirits in different areas. So that's going to be something that will be posted on Patreon within the next week for patrons. And you can get some tangible tools on how to do that, but also follow your gut.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here, for tuning in, for enjoying this space with us. This has been a wonderful episode. Happy Pride. And we hope that you 2, 3, go make some magic. No,
it was good for
I don't.
me. I hesitated because my brain was like, we want to do it actually with Emily this time. And I was like, no, because that's not actually with Emily for everybody else. But here we are. I'm proud of us anyway. And I'm proud of you.